when a 16-year-old black teenager named Malik is dragged into court for a crime he didn't commit. He faces a racist judge who mocks him for daring to speak. What begins as humiliation soon transforms into a battle of wits when Malik, a secret legal prodigy, begins citing laws and dismantling the lies stacked against him. From the judge's cruelty and the prosecutor's arrogance to Malik's breaking point where he boldly confronts the system, every chapter builds toward explosive tension. Outside the courtroom, his words spark protests and media storms, turning his trial into a national spotlight as Malik shatters false evidence, exposes contradictions, and wins the hearts of the jury. The judge who once laughed at him begins to lose all control. In the end, poetic justice strikes the boy they mocked as powerless, proves that truth, courage, and resilience can shake the walls of corruption, and justice finally answers the cries of the oppressed. The wooden benches creaked as people shuffled in, whispering with the quiet hunger of an audience waiting for a show. At the front, Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, his lips curled into something between boredom and disdain. His robe was black, but his smirk was sharper than any gavel. "Next case," he drawled. "State versus Malik Johnson." A hush swept the room. 16-year-old Malik rose slowly, his wrists trembling as he held his school bag like a shield. His mother sat behind him, wringing her hands, whispering, "Please, God, please, protect my boy." The bailiff sneered, jerking his head toward the defendant's table. Malik walked forward, every step echoing against marble floors that seemed designed to make the accused feel small. "Johnson," the judge squinted. "That's you. You look like you belong in juvie, not in my courtroom." Laughter rippled across the gallery. Malik froze, his throat burned. He wanted to shout back, but his mother's tear-filled eyes reminded him to hold still. His assigned public defender leaned close, smelling faintly of stale coffee. "Don't react," he whispered, flatly. "It'll only make things worse." Worse. The word coiled inside Malik's chest like a snake. How could it be worse than a courtroom laughing at him before a single word of evidence had been spoken? The prosecutor, a tall man with a slick suit and slicker smile, rose from his table. "Your Honor, the state is prepared to demonstrate that. Young Mr. Johnson here," he let the words drip slowly, "fits a pattern we've seen too many times. Wrong friends, wrong choices, wrong path." The judge nodded as if truth had already been spoken. Looks about right," gasps. A few chuckles. Someone muttered, "Figures." Malik's ears rang. He lowered his head, his fists hidden under the table. He had studied this room in silence for weeks, memorizing every word, every motion, every trap. He wasn't just a scared kid. But no one could see that yet. The prosecutor's voice boomed. "Your Honor, this won't take long. The evidence is straightforward. The defendant was found near the scene, wearing suspicious clothing. His fingerprints." Objection. It wasn't his lawyer's voice, it was Malik's. The room stilled. His public defender tugged his sleeve. In panic, Don't speak." Judge Harrison leaned forward, his grin widening. "Oh, the little man wants to play lawyer." More laughter. Malik's lips pressed shut, but his heart pounded like war drums. The judge shook his head. "Sit down, son. Leave the lawyering to the grown-ups." The words burned. Every letter was fire. Malik's silence wasn't weakness. It was the first step of something bigger. The narration hovered like a whisper. They wanted a show. They wanted a boy broken before their eyes. What they didn't know was that Malik had already memorized the script, and he was about to rewrite it. The wooden benches creaked as people shuffled in, whispering with the quiet hunger of an audience waiting for a show. At the front, Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, his lips curled into something between boredom and disdain. His robe was black, but his smirk was the gavel struck, not to command order, but to punctuate ridicule. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his eyes narrowing on Malik as if he were a curiosity in a zoo cage. "So," the judge said slowly, "our defendant thinks he's a lawyer now. Cute. Must be all those TV shows. Tell me, son," his tone dripped with sarcasm, "are you planning to object every time the truth hurts?" Laughter rippled across the gallery. Malik didn't answer. His jaw tightened. The public defender cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, I'd like to proceed with." "Sit down," Harrison snapped. "I'll let you know when I need your expertise." He smirked at the prosecutor. "Go on. Entertain us." The prosecutor, Mr. Kessler, strolled to the center like an actor hitting his mark. His voice was syrupy, but his words cut like blades. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, gesturing toward Malik, "what we have here is not just a mistake. This is a young man on the edge of disaster, caught where he shouldn't have been, dressed how criminals dress, acting how criminals act. He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, with a mocking grin, and apparently, now pretending he's a lawyer too, the courtroom chuckled again. Malik's mother shook her head violently, whispering, "Stop, please stop." Her shoulders trembled as she reached for a tissue, her quiet sobs drowned out by the noise of mockery. Malik sat frozen, his fists clenched under the table until his nails dug into his palms. The narration whispered, "This is how they silence you. Not with chains, not with cells, with laughter, with shame, with the weight of an audience applauding your humiliation." The public defender finally rose, his papers trembling. "Ah, Your Honor, if I may." Harrison rolled his eyes. "Proceed, counselor. Try to sound like you prepared for this." A new wave of laughter. The lawyer's face burned red. He mumbled something about Malik's lack of prior offenses, but his words were swallowed by his own hesitancy. He tripped over sentences, skipped over evidence, and offered half-hearted defense as though even he believed Malik guilty. Malik leaned slightly toward him, whispering urgently, "You're forgetting the timeline mentioned, the time gap." The lawyer blinked, confused, then continued fumbling. He ignored Malik's advice. Kessler smirked. "Your Honor, the defense's attempt is touching, but the facts remain." Witnesses placed the defendant nearby, his fingerprints on the object, his behavior suspicious. The judge nodded, clear as day. "You'd have to be blind not to see it." The gallery murmured in agreement. Malik's chest heaved. Every word felt like a noose tightening. He looked at his mother again. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her eyes begged him to endure. So he did. He sat in silence, but inside, the silence screamed. The judge tapped his gavel lazily. "This case is practically writing itself. The boy's future looks about as promising as his present." Another chuckle. Malik's lips pressed into a thin line. He inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly. His silence was no longer fear. It was sharpening into something stronger. The narration observed. Every insult became a stone. They wanted him buried, but Malik was quietly building a foundation. The prosecutor strutted back to his seat, smug. The judge reclined again, satisfied with the spectacle, and Malik, though outwardly motionless, clenched his fists tighter under the table. The burn in his palms reminded him, this wasn't over. The chapter closed on his whispered vow, almost inaudible but searing in the silence of his own mind. "I'll show them. I'll show them all." Sharper than any gavel. "Next case," he drawled. "State versus Malik Johnson." A hush swept the room. 16-year-old Malik rose slowly, his wrists trembling as he held his school bag like a shield. His mother sat behind him, wringing her hands, whispering, "Please, God, please, protect my boy." The bailiff sneered, jerking his head toward the defendant's table. Malik walked forward, every step echoing against marble floors that seemed designed to make the accused feel small. "Johnson." The judge squinted. "That's you. You look like you belong in juvie, not in my courtroom." Laughter rippled across the gallery. Malik froze. His throat burned. He wanted to shout back, but his mother's tear-filled eyes reminded him to hold still. His assigned public defender leaned close, smelling faintly of stale coffee. "Don't react," he whispered, flatly. "It'll only make things worse." Worse. The word coiled inside Malik's chest like a snake. How could it be worse than a courtroom laughing at him before a single word of evidence had been spoken? The prosecutor, a tall man with a slick suit and slicker smile, rose from his table. "Your Honor, the state is prepared to demonstrate that young Mr. Johnson here," he let the words drip slowly, "fits a pattern we've seen too many times. Wrong friends, wrong choices, wrong path." The judge nodded as if truth had already been spoken. Looks about right." Gasps, a few chuckles. Someone muttered, "Figures." Malik's ears rang. He lowered his head, his fists hidden under the table. He had studied this room in silence for weeks, memorizing every word, every motion, every trap. He wasn't just a scared kid, but no one could see that yet. The prosecutor's voice boomed, "Your Honor, this won't take long. The evidence is straightforward. The defendant was found near the scene, wearing suspicious clothing. His fingerprints." Objection. It wasn't his lawyer's voice, it was Malik's. The room stilled. His public defender tugged his sleeve, in panic. Don't speak." Judge Harrison leaned forward, his grin widening. "Oh, the little man wants to play lawyer." More laughter. Malik's lips pressed shut, but his heart pounded like war drums. The judge shook his head. Sit down, son. Leave the lawyering to the grown-ups. The words burned. Every letter was fire. Malik's silence wasn't weakness. It was the first step of something bigger. The narration hovered like a whisper. They wanted a show. They wanted a boy broken before their eyes. What they didn't know was that Malik had already memorized the script, and he was about to rewrite it. The recess bell rang like mercy. The courtroom emptied into hallways humming with chatter, coffee cups clinking, whispers buzzing. Malik stayed seated, his hands gripping the edge of the table. His mother approached, her face pale. Baby, why won't they listen? Why are they laughing? She whispered, her voice fraying with despair. Malik lifted his eyes to hers, calm despite the storm. Because they think that's all I am, Mama. A joke. She touched his cheek, her hand trembling. Just keep quiet. Don't make them angrier, please. He nodded softly, though inside he was already planning his next move. The public defender shuffled papers, muttering to himself. He looked exhausted, his tie crooked, sweat shining on his forehead. Malik stared at him, then leaned forward. You misquoted the case law, Malik said quietly. The lawyer blinked. What? You cited State v. Hampton like it was precedent. For the prosecution, it's not. It was overturned in Hampton v. State, Appeal Court, 2009. You just gave them ammunition. The lawyer froze, his mouth slightly open. How do you, Malik continued, his voice low but firm, and the prosecutor's timeline? It doesn't hold. He said, I was seen at 8:30, but the police log shows the call didn't come until 8:47. If you'd pressed that, his witness would have cracked. The defender leaned back, staring as if seeing Malik for the first time. You shouldn't even know that language. How? I've been studying, Malik answered simply. Law books, case files, everything I could get my hands on from the library. 3 years now. The lawyer's brows furrowed. 3 years. You're 16. Yeah, Malik's voice tightened. And in 3 years I've seen more of this system than you want to admit. If I don't learn the rules, they'll bury me. So I learned. The defender stared, stunned. Then he laughed once, bitterly. Kid, do you understand how insane this is? You're not supposed to know any of this. Malik leaned closer, his eyes blazing. That's the point. They don't expect me to. They expect me to sit here, quiet, waiting to be crushed. But I know the rules better than they do. The lawyer rubbed his forehead, shaken. Even if you're right, they'll never let you speak. Judge Harrison will tear you apart. Malik's lips curved in a tight line. Then I'll speak through you. The recess ended. The bailiff barked. All rise. Everyone returned to their seats. The air thickened again, charged with tension. The prosecutor resumed, smug, stacking evidence like bricks. Malik leaned close to his lawyer, whispering rapidly, Object, improper foundation. Cite Rule 602. The lawyer hesitated. Do it, Malik urged. The lawyer cleared his throat. Objection, Your Honor. Rule 602. Lack of personal knowledge. The prosecutor blinked, thrown off. The judge frowned. Sustained, a ripple of surprise ran through the courtroom. Malik whispered again. Ask him to clarify the timestamp. The lawyer repeated it, shaky at first. The prosecutor faltered, flipping through notes. A timestamp was 8:40-something. The 40-something. The gallery murmured. Judge Harrison's eyes narrowed. Counselor, where are you going with this? The defender swallowed hard, glancing at Malik. Just clarifying inconsistencies, Your Honor. Malik whispered again. Push on the call log. The lawyer followed. Isn't it true, Mr. Kessler, that the police log indicates the call was made at 8:47, not 8:30? The prosecutors stiffened. That may be a clerical error. Whispers spread through the courtroom. The judge tapped his gavel sharply. Order, order. His gaze flicked briefly toward Malik. His smirk was gone, replaced by suspicion. AlexSatStraight.com. His lips sealed, but his eyes shone with quiet fire. The narration intruded. The silence had shifted. No longer humiliation, but calculation. The boy they mocked was reshaping the room, one whispered word at a time. The defender looked at Malik in disbelief. He whispered, barely audible, Kid, you're running this trial. Malik's answer was steady. Not yet, but I will. The chapter closed on Judge Harrison's glare, a predator suddenly aware that his prey might have teeth. The courtroom had changed. The laughter was thinner now, edged with unease. The gallery leaned forward in their seats, watching a trial that was no longer routine. Judge Harrison noticed it too. His smirk had curdled into a scowl. He slammed his gavel. Crack. Enough games, he barked. His eyes locked on Malik, sharp as glass. I know what's going on here. You think you're clever, don't you, boy? The gallery gasped at the venom in his tone. Malik stayed silent. His pulse pounded, but his gaze was steady. The judge leaned forward, whispering into your lawyer's ear like some little mastermind. This isn't a classroom debate club. This is my court. And in my court, you stay silent unless spoken to. Understood? The silence stretched. Malik gave the smallest nod. Harrison sneered. Good, because the next time you play attorney, I'll have you held in contempt. And trust me, you don't want to know what that means. A nervous chuckle rippled through the gallery, quickly dying under the weight of tension. The prosecutor smirked. Your Honor, may I remind the court that the defendant is 16. He clearly doesn't understand the seriousness of these proceedings. That was too much for Malik. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered, ask him if Rule 403 applies, relevance and prejudice. The lawyer hesitated, sweat forming on his temple, but he repeated it. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance, Rule 403. The prosecutor blinked. Thrown again. This is relevant. The judge slammed his gavel. Overruled. And one more thing, he jabbed a finger at Malik. If you so much as open your mouth again, I'll make sure you regret it. The gallery murmured, the sound of unease rising like a tide. Some looked at Malik with pity, others with curiosity. Bafni Malik swallowed hard. His heart screamed at him to fight, but his mother's sobbing in the back row tethered him still. He couldn't stay silent forever. The prosecutor called a witness, a middle-aged man, who claimed to have seen Malik lurking near the scene. Malik leaned toward his lawyer again, whispering, cross-examine him on distance. He was over 50 yards away. Line of sight obstruction, Rule 701. Opinion testimony. The lawyer obeyed, voice shaky but firm. Sir, how far were you from the defendant when you claimed to have seen him? About 50 yards, and between you and him were there streetlights, buildings. The man hesitated. There was a streetlight, yes, and a delivery truck parked near the curb. Murmurs erupted. The gallery shifted. Malik whispered again. Ask if he wore glasses. The lawyer followed. Do you normally wear corrective lenses, sir? The witness looked uncomfortable. Yes, glasses. But I wasn't wearing them that night. A wave of whispers rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. Objection. This is badgering. No, Malik whispered. Urgently, say it's foundation for credibility. The lawyer echoed. Your Honor, it goes to credibility of the witness. Judge Harrison's face turned red. He slammed the gavel. Crack. Enough. His voice thundered. This is outrageous. I will not have this puppet show continue. Everyone in this room knows who's pulling the strings. Every head turned toward Malik. The boy sat straight, calm, his lips pressed together. He didn't flinch. The judge stood, pointing at him. You think you're smart. You think you can outmaneuver officers of the court. You're a child, a criminal, nothing more. This ends now. For the first time, Malik spoke, not loud, but clear. With respect, Your Honor. The law doesn't care how old I am. The room went still. The judge's face twisted with rage. Silence. One more word and I'll charge you with contempt. Malik's lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering frantically, Stop, kid, please. But Malik's eyes didn't waver. The narration whispered over the silence. Oppression fears intelligence, especially when intelligence comes from the mouths it tried to silence. They mocked him when he was quiet. They raged when he spoke. Either way, they feared him. The judge's gavel came down again, but his hand trembled. The gallery buzzed louder than ever. For the first time, it wasn't Malik who looked cornered. It was the judge. The next witness shuffled nervously to the stand, a young officer in uniform. His badge gleamed, but his eyes flickered when he glanced at Malik. Prosecutor Kessler straightened his tie. Officer Daniels, please tell the court what you observed. The night of the incident, the officer cleared his throat. I saw the defendant near the alleyway. He matched the description given by the caller. When we approached, he appeared nervous and attempted to walk away. Kessler smiled. And, in your professional experience, that behavior was suspicious. Yes, sir. Thank you. No further questions. The judge turned. Defense. Malik leaned close to his lawyer, whispering rapidly. Ask him what training qualifies him to label behavior as suspicious. Rule 701. He's not an expert. The lawyer hesitated, but Malik's eyes burned with insistence. He rose. Officer, what specific training do you have in behavioral psychology or criminal profiling? The officer blinked. None, sir. I'm just speaking from experience. So, you're offering a personal opinion, not expert testimony. Yes, which means your statement about suspicious behavior is just that, your personal opinion. Yes. The gallery stirred. Kessler jumped up. Objection. Counsel is twisting the officer's words. The judge's jaw clenched. Overruled. Proceed. Malik's lawyer glanced down. Malik whispered again. Press him on visibility. Time of night. Lighting. Officer. The lawyer continued. Was it dark at the time? Yes. Street lights working. Some, not all. And how far were you from my client when you claim he appeared nervous? The officer shifted. About 30 feet. So at night, under poor lighting, 30 feet away, you decided his walking away was suspicious. The officer stammered. Yes, sir, but no further questions. The courtroom buzzed. The officer stepped down, cheeks flushed. The next witness was called. A shop owner who claimed Malik fit the type of kids who caused trouble. Before Kessler could finish his questions, Malik leaned in again. Cross him on bias. Prior complaints. Has he made reports about young black teens before? The lawyer followed, his voice steadier now. Sir, have you ever reported young men from Malik's neighborhood before this case? The shopkeeper stiffened. Well, yes, they loiter. They intimidate customers. Have any of those reports led to charges? No. So your complaints were based on assumptions, not proven incidents. The shopkeeper sputtered. I run a business. I know trouble when I see it. Malik whispered. Ask if he remembers my face from that night. The lawyer pressed. Do you specifically remember seeing Malik Johnson on the night in question? The shopkeeper hesitated, beads of sweat forming. I can't be certain. The gallery erupted in whispers. Someone muttered. Then Wise, he here. The judge banged his gavel. Crack order in this courtroom, but order was slipping. The balance of power had shifted. Every cross-examination Malik directed exposed cracks in the prosecution's case. Witnesses faltered, details unraveled. The prosecutor's smirk began to fade, replaced by clenched fists and grinding teeth at the defense table. Malik's lawyer stared at him with something between awe and disbelief. Kid, he whispered during a pause, I don't know how you're doing this, but you're tearing them apart. Malik's reply was quiet, steady. The truth was always there. They just never expected me to know how to show it. His mother sat straighter in the gallery now, tears still in her eyes. But this time, they carried pride. The narration cut in. What began as silence was now strategy. What began as humiliation was becoming resistance. The boy they tried to bury was teaching the courtroom that he could not only stand, he could fight. The judge, however, wasn't done. His gavel slammed again. This circus has gone far enough. I will not let this child turn my courtroom into a playground. One more stunt, and he's out. But the murmurs in the gallery told a different story. They weren't laughing anymore. They were listening. And Malik.com/steady, unshaken, knew this was only the beginning. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Judge Harrison's gavel struck again, his voice booming. I will not allow this charade to continue. This boy is not an attorney. He is a defendant, and he will act like one. The gallery rustled. Some leaned forward, hungry for the spectacle. Others glanced uneasily at Malik, sensing the air was about to change. Malik's lawyer whispered, Don't say a word, please, he'll bury you. But Malik's eyes stayed locked on the bench. The words he'd swallowed for days pressed against his lips like fire. The prosecutor smirked, leaning back in his chair. Exactly, Your Honor. The defense is being manipulated by a child who thinks reading a few books makes him a lawyer. The judge sneered. A wannabe Perry Mason. A clown. Something inside Malik snapped. He stood. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, slicing through the murmurs. The gallery froze. Your Honor, Malik said, his voice calm but unwavering. With all due respect, the law doesn't care if I'm 16. It doesn't care if I'm black. It doesn't care what you think I look like. The law is the law. A hush swallowed the room. The judge's face turned crimson. Sit down, now. But Malik didn't move. I know, Rule 609, Malik continued, his voice steady. I know you can't discredit me with assumptions about my past because I don't have one. I know Rule 403, that irrelevant prejudice isn't admissible. I know Miranda v. Arizona, 1966, which says everything they claimed I said without a lawyer present is inadmissible too. The prosecutor shot up, furious. Objection, Your Honor. He's grandstanding. But the objection rang hollow. The crowd had gone silent, drinking in every word. Malik's mother clutched her chest, tears streaming. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel. Crack. Silence. You are out of order. Do you hear me? Out of order. Malik met his glare head-on. No, sir. With respect, I'm finally in order. For the first time in this trial, someone is. The gallery erupted. Gasps, whispers, even a few cheers quickly hushed. Reporters scribbled furiously in notepads. The judge's hand trembled around his gavel. He slammed it again, but the sound no longer commanded fear. It sounded desperate. Bailiff, control this room, Harrison barked. The bailiff shifted uneasily, glancing at the murmuring crowd, but didn't move. Malik inhaled deeply. He turned to the jury box, his voice softer but cutting through the noise. All I ask is that you look at the facts, not the jokes, not the stereotypes, the facts. And if you do, you'll see the truth. The silence that followed was deafening. The narration whispered over the scene. Power trembles when truth speaks. They mocked him when he was quiet. They threatened him when he whispered. But when he finally raised his voice, the courtroom remembered even a boy could shatter an empire of lies. Judge Harrison's face was a storm. He slammed the gavel one final time. Recess. Now. He stormed from the bench, his robe billowing like smoke. But the gallery wasn't watching him anymore. All eyes were on Malik. And for the first time, they weren't laughing. The courthouse steps had never seen a crowd like this. When Malik and his mother walked out after recess, the flash of cameras hit them like a storm. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust into the air. Malik, is it true you cited Supreme Court cases on your own? Do you really intend to represent yourself? Judge Harrison mocked you. What's your response? Malik froze, blinded by the attention. His mother pulled him close. We don't owe them anything, she whispered. But the words were already out there. Reporters replayed his courtroom speech again and again. Headlines spreading like wildfire. Teen defendant dismantles judge in open court. 16-year-old quotes, law, better than lawyers. Judge Harrison loses control amid teens. Stunning defense. By evening, the city buzzed. On one corner, college students painted signs, Justice for Malik. Across town, activists planned a march. Inside the judge's chambers, Harrison raged. This is out of hand, he barked, slamming a folder against the desk. He's turned this into a circus. The prosecutor shifted uneasily. The media's eating it up, Your Honor. They're calling him a prodigy, a genius. If we keep hammering him enough, Harrison snapped, he's a boy, he'll slip, and when he does, I'll crush him. Do you hear me? The prosecutor nodded, but doubt flickered in his eyes. That night, Malik sat at the kitchen table, his textbooks open. His mother stood over him, arms folded. You shouldn't have spoken like that, she said softly. You put yourself in more danger. Malik looked up, weary but determined. If I don't speak, Mom, they'll bury me alive. At least now, someone's listening. She swallowed hard. You're still just a boy. They'll twist your words. Maybe, Malik admitted, but silence is worse. Silence is what they want. The room fell quiet. The sound of pages turning the only comfort. 2 days later, when court resumed, the gallery overflowed. Protesters stood outside with signs, fair trial for Malik. End judicial racism. Inside, whispers filled the chamber until Judge Harrison entered. His face was stone, but his eyes betrayed rage. Let the record show. Harrison growled. This courtroom will not be influenced by media, protests, or public opinion. Malik stood slowly. His voice was even. Respectfully, Your Honor. The people have a right to watch justice being done. If it's truly justice, why fear their eyes? The gallery erupted, clapping murmurs. A cheer quickly silenced by a gavel strike. Order, Harrison thundered. One more outburst and I'll clear this courtroom. But his threats rang thinner now. Even the bailiff looked uneasy, eyes darting between the boy and the judge. Outside, the storm swelled. News vans lined the streets. Social media lit up with clips of Malik standing tall against the judge. A video of him saying the law doesn't care if I'm 16. It doesn't care if I'm black. The law is the law. Went viral overnight. Comment sections filled with outrage, support, disbelief. This boy's got more courage than half the lawyers in this country. That judge should be investigated. He's a disgrace. Malik is a hero in the making. Late that night, Judge Harrison sat alone in his study, the glow of his phone illuminating his scowl. He scrolled through headlines that painted him as a villain. His wife entered quietly. "Henry, maybe you should step back from this case." "It's never," he snapped, slamming the phone down. "I'll not be made a fool by some child." But in the silence that followed, even Harrison knew the tide was turning. Back in Malik's small bedroom, the boy lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't sure if he was winning or just surviving. But for the first time, he felt the weight of something bigger than his own freedom. "They're listening now," he thought. "Not just to me. To everyone who's been ignored." His fists clenched under the blanket. Tomorrow, he knew, would be even harder. But Malik wasn't afraid anymore. The narrator's voice whispered through the tension, "When truth escapes the courtroom, it cannot be caged again." What began as mockery had become a movement, and the judge, who thought he held the gavel, now felt the echo of every strike rebound against him. The courtroom was packed again. Every seat taken, every breath hushed, the air pulsed with anticipation. Judge Harrison entered with his usual gavel strike, but the sound no longer commanded respect. It sounded brittle, like an old bone. "Proceed," he said sharply, glaring at Malik. "Let's get this over with." The prosecutor rose first, striding confidently toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is playing a game. He's a child pretending to be a lawyer. Do not be distracted. The evidence is clear. Malik Johnson was at the scene. Witnesses place him there. His fingerprints were found on stolen property. It's an open and shut case." He returned to his table with a satisfied smirk. All eyes shifted to Malik. The boy stood slowly, his thin frame almost swallowed by the courtroom's weight. But his voice carried steady, each word sharp as glass. "Members of the jury," he began, "you've heard their story. But stories without truth are just lies dressed in suits." The gallery stirred, but Malik stepped toward the evidence table, his hands trembling slightly, but he forced himself to steady them. "They claim my fingerprints prove guilt," he said. "But what they didn't tell you is that the object was handled by dozens of kids in my neighborhood that day. The police collected it from a public basketball court. Are fingerprints enough to convict someone when they could belong to anyone?" He paused, letting the words sink in. The jury shifted, unease flickering across faces. The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. He's misleading the jury." Judge Harrison leaned forward, eyes narrowed, sustained. But Malik didn't back down. "With respect, Your Honor. I'm quoting directly from precedent. Daubert v. Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, 1993. Evidence must meet standards of reliability. Partial fingerprints without context failed that standard." The courtroom gasped. Even a few lawyers in the gallery leaned forward, impressed. Harrison's face tightened. "Move on." Malik turned to the jury again. "They also say witnesses placed me at the scene. But who were these witnesses?" He picked up a sheet of paper. 3 statements, each one from someone pressured by police, each one contradictory. One says I was wearing red, another says blue, another couldn't even describe my face. And yet, that's enough to put me in prison. The prosecutor's face flushed. "Objection overruled," Harrison barked. Though his tone was strained, the jury murmured. The seed of doubt firmly planted, Malik walked closer, his eyes scanning their faces. "Do you know where I really was? At home, studying, with my mother." "That's not speculation. That's fact." But they never came to ask. They assumed, they decided. Because to them, I was already guilty. His voice cracked, but he steadied it with sheer will. "Not guilty because of evidence. Guilty because of me. Because of how I look. Because of where I live. Because in their eyes, that's enough." The gallery broke into murmurs again, a low tide of outrage. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel. "Crack order. One more disruption and I'll clear this court." But the gavel sounded weaker than ever. Malik's eyes stayed locked on the jury. "You don't have to listen to me. Just look at the facts. Look at how fast they moved to charge me. Look at how they laughed in this courtroom when I spoke. Ask yourself, is that justice, or is it fear dressed as authority?" He stepped back slowly, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. "I am not asking for sympathy. I am asking for fairness. That's all any of us deserve." Silence hung heavy, broken only by the frantic scribbling of reporters. The prosecutor sputtered, fumbling through papers. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." But Harrison's glare shut him up. The judge's face was pale. his lips pressed thin. He looked less like a man in control, and more like someone cornered by truth he couldn't contain. The jury whispered among themselves, the gallery buzzing with quiet electricity. And Malik sat down, his hands trembling under the table. His mother reached for him, squeezing his fingers with tears in her eyes. For the first time, the balance in the courtroom had shifted. The boy who was supposed to be broken had begun breaking the system itself. The narrator's voice closed the scene. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet defiance of a boy who refuses to bow. The gavel cracked, but the cracks were no longer in him. They were in the walls that tried to contain him. The courtroom pulsed with an uneasy silence, every seat filled, every pair of eyes fixed forward. The walls themselves seemed to tremble with anticipation. Judge Harrison banged his gavel harder than usual. "Crack. This court will come to order." But the sound no longer commanded obedience. It sounded desperate. Malik sat beside his mother, his hands trembling but steadying in hers. Across the aisle, the prosecutor shuffled papers with frantic energy, muttering to himself. The jury filed back and their faces were unreadable, masks carved from stone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Harrison began, his voice low, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreman rose, clutching the folded paper. His throat cleared nervously. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." The gallery held its breath. The bailiff carried the slip to Harrison, who scanned it quickly. His face darkened, his lips tightened, his knuckles whitened around the gavel. He looked up at the jury. "You may read your verdict aloud." The foreman unfolded the slip. His voice wavered at first, but then found strength. "In the matter of the state versus Malik Johnson, we, the jury, find the defendant." The pause felt eternal. Malik's chest ached with the weight of it. "Not guilty." The words struck the air like thunder. The gallery erupted, gasps, cheers, even sobs. Reporters scrambled, pens flying. Protesters outside roared as the verdict reached the steps. Malik's mother broke down in tears, clutching her son as if afraid he might vanish. "You're free," she whispered, her voice shaking. "My baby, you're free." But Judge Harrison slammed his gavel furiously. "Crack, crack, crack, order, order. I said order." His face was crimson, his voice trembling with rage. "This jury has been misled, manipulated by theatrics and objection." Malik's attorney shouted suddenly, standing for the first time with fire in his eyes. "The jury has spoken. Their verdict is final." The jury turned toward the judge, their eyes hard. The foreman straightened his shoulders. "We deliberated fairly, Your Honor. We stand by our decision." The prosecutor dropped into his chair, defeated, his face pale as paper. The judge's voice cracked. You don't understand. He fooled all of you. He's just a boy." Malik stood, his voice steady though his body shook. "No, Your Honor, I'm not just a boy. I'm a citizen. And today, justice finally remembered me." The crowd roared again, drowning out the furious banging of the gavel. Harrison's words dissolved into the chaos. His robe, once a symbol of power, now looked like a costume stripped of meaning. The bailiff hesitated, then gently touched Malik's shoulder, not to restrain him, but to guide him toward freedom. Malik turned one last time to face the bench, his eyes locked on Harrison's. "You mocked me," he said quietly, "but the law mocked you back." The judge's jaw trembled, but no words came. The narrator's voice fell heavy. "Poetic power, when abused, becomes a cage, and when the truth steps into the light, that cage collapses, not on the innocent, but on the hand that forged it." The gavel cracked today, but the fracture was not in justice. It was in the man who thought he owned it. As Malik and his mother walked out, sunlight poured over them. The chants of the crowd rose, a tidal wave of voices carrying his name. And inside the courtroom, Judge Harrison sat slumped in his chair, surrounded by the silence of his own downfall. The courthouse steps had never seen such a storm. Reporters jostled with cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons of truth. Protesters waved signs high in the air. "Justice for Malik. End the bias. No one above the law." Malik stood in the center of it all, his mother's hand clasped firmly in his. His attorney held back the press as best he could, but the questions still flew like arrows. "Malik, how does it feel to be free? Do you forgive the court? What will you do now?" Malik didn't answer immediately. He inhaled, the sunlight warm on his skin, the air buzzing with freedom. He had been silent too long, his words stolen by fear. Now, the world demanded. He stepped forward, his voice steady. Today, justice wasn't given to me. It was taken back from those who tried to steal it. This isn't just about me. This is about every young man who has been silenced, every family broken, every truth buried. Today proves that cages built on lies can be broken. The crowd erupted, chants rolling like thunder across the courthouse square. Inside, the storm took another shape. Judge Harrison sat alone at his bench, the weight of silence crushing him. His gavel lay discarded, useless, a broken symbol of his authority. The court officers avoided his gaze, their respect dissolved into pity, or worse, contempt. He had ruled this courtroom for decades, commanding fear and obedience. But fear had cracked, and obedience had fled. The jury had defied him. The people had rejected him. And Malik, the boy he mocked, the boy he thought powerless, had become the face of victory. A whisper slithered through the courthouse corridors. The state is filing for investigation. Corruption, bias, abuse of authority. His name, once untouchable, was now tethered to scandal. For the first time in his career, Judge Harrison felt something alien, powerless. He rose, his robe dragging behind him like a shroud. When he opened the side door to leave, reporters swarmed him. Flashbulbs exploded in his face. Judge Harrison, do you regret your treatment of Malik Johnson? Are you stepping down? Do you deny the allegations of bias and misconduct? His lips trembled, but no words came. For a man who once silenced entire rooms with a single command, the irony was cruel. His voice, the very thing that defined his power, abandoned him. Outside, Malik spoke again. His words were not loud, but they carried. I don't want revenge, he said. I want change. I want a world where truth doesn't have to fight this hard to be heard, where a boy like me doesn't have to prove he's human before he proves he's innocent. The crowd cheered, and for the first time in years, Malik felt tall, taller than the courthouse, taller than the judge, taller than the cage he had been forced into. He raised his hand, not in anger, but in triumph. The protesters mirrored him, fists lifted high. A sea of defiance turned into unity. His mother whispered, tears shining in her eyes, your father would be proud. Malik smiled, his heart finally unburdened. He's here, Mom. He's here. In every step I take. The narrator's voice closed the story with heavy grace. Poetic justice is not a verdict written on paper, nor a sentence passed down by robed men. It is the truth rising from silence. It is the fall of arrogance before the eyes of the people. Today, Malik walked free. But freedom was not his alone. The chains that bound him shattered across an entire community, and the man who forged them sat in ruins. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Malik walked down the courthouse steps, his mother at his side, the chants echoing like music. Behind him, Judge Harrison disappeared into obscurity, a name no longer feared, only remembered as the man who thought he could own justice, but instead was consumed by it, and the world, watching, realized one thing. Truth may stumble, but it never falls.